to be a part and partnering with this organization of WWFC. So we start the topic now. I leave the conference open. The topic is technology adoption and education. Now, the more we speak about digitalization, the more we speak about technology is it's very dynamic. It keeps changing by the minute, and we all are aware of it. Especially for the teachers and for education, it's been a tough 4 months because we have about 60 million children in a school and who have not been able to attend school and colleges across the globe in the crucial months of February to August. It's extremely tough. Well, we are not alien to the idea of technology adoption in education. We are all aware of flipped classrooms. We are all aware of the digital pedagogies, but we never realized that the transition is going to be so sudden and so quick. And that's where I think this particular conference was crucial. We have our conferences every Saturday, and we started around May first week. It's been a great journey, great exchange of ideas, great exchange of insights. We have received a lot of ideas on best practices by different institutions and educationists across the globe. We've shared our issues with each other. We've tried to come up with solutions, and I think this is exactly what we are going to do today also. What I feel is it is not just about using digital technologies for teaching and learning, but it is rather about approaching the digital tools from a critical pedagogical perspective. That's where the teachers play a very, very important role. What is the kind of user engagement? Because this user engagement becomes the key. We need to create a digital space for our students. We need to create this space where philosophy and practice meet. And as easy as I'm saying it, it's surprisingly difficult because it's an investigation of learning, and which by its nature itself is emergent. It's ever evolving. Well, I've been always a fan of flipped classes, and flipped classrooms remain my personal favorite because of the great strength that this methodology holds, to flip a class. We transfer the complete ownership of the methodology or the learning to the students. And this becomes extremely personalized when applied online digital platforms. It gives teachers time also to explore and understand their students better. And so that's been my personal favorite for all the time. And we have a lot of fantastic instructional tools that are available because of the HRD ministry as well. They've come up with MS Classrooms, they've come up with Google Classrooms, which are even provided free for the next 6 months in India. For the students who don't have digital facilities or infrastructure in their villages, we have satellite, and the satellite channels are airing classes from every best faculty in India for the remotest child who wants to learn through television. Other than this, we have various digital tools that the faculties can use. We have Animoto, we have Grammarly, we have Century, we have Kahoot. But according to me, and I will leave you with these thoughts, the challenges remain the same. We do have easy solutions for it, but then it's easier said than done. So the first and the foremost problem that I foresee in digital education online, see, once everything lifts up, we don't know when, the corona is here to stay. But the post-lockdown challenges are going to be of a different nature to the education institution because we don't have endless infrastructure. But while we are online, the biggest problem that I foresee is that the faculties are stripped of the face of a student. That becomes extremely tough to engage into something on a particular topic when all you have here is a screen with the name of a student. It becomes difficult. Second, you're not able to understand the attention span. You cannot engage a student's classes like you used to engage for an hour or 15 minutes. Then, of course, there are technical difficulties because all areas, all rural areas do not have the digital connectivity or the infrastructure that we envision for the right digital pedagogy. Then, of course, we have tools to make these things easier, but the timelines and the real-time talking exchanging is absent in this. Well, all I can say is it's going to be a tough next 1 year, and blended learning is going to be the future. All we can do is de-stress the students and the teachers by counseling them, by mentoring them time to time, and also follow very strict self-discipline. So yeah, we have questions, we have answers also. We have, it is an engagement that is very, very relative. It is engagement one to one, depends on the location that you're in, depends on the kind of students you're addressing to. So it's become very flexible in that sense. I am personally in favor of blended learning mechanisms, and we at our university have been practicing it. So let's hope I leave you all with these thoughts, and I hope to have a very engaging, insightful, informative session today as well. I thank you all for having accepted to be here, and I now call upon our Vice Chancellor, Dr. D.L. Maheshwar, who will also critically explain us about what his thoughts are in the next 2 minutes, please. Over to you, Dr. Maheshwar.
Yes, madam. Thank you, madam. Yeah. At the outset, let me also welcome the speakers for today's, 10th series of this webinar. And now I could also try to take an account of the erstwhile 9 series of the webinar, wherein, all the experts' visions, insights have been pulled, and now we're at the final stage of its compilation as to what could be the mode of recommendation, what should be the nature of, taking this, blended learning, and how to engage the students and the faculty in a more meaningful way. And in this context, thanks to the efforts of the faculty, the students and the mentors in an university like Best IU University, wherein for in the higher education for agricultural sciences, like agriculture courses, forestry courses, and horticulture courses, the applications of the technology has been so fruitful, and it has given a productive result. More than about 30 courses in the agricultural discipline have been covered with the online. More than about 60% of the courses contents have been covered with online, and the mentoring efforts of the faculty is highly appreciable. The involvement of the students is also quite positive. They have been mentored through mock tests, they have been mentored through rehearsals, they have been mentored through consequent backup plans and all. Now as a result, their involvement in the exams like midterm, practical, and final examinations all have been very fruitful. So I should say that even in the situation of a COVID, the technology has come to the safety of the academic academic stability. So that's why even in practical sciences, higher education, the technology is applicable and it is found quite fruitful. So in this context, the robust IT framework, the adoption and application of new interventions as per the guidelines of the UGC, as per the support of the ICR, they have all been complied with. So in a way, the system has been so so projective that over a period of time, I'm sure that even for higher education and practical courses like professional courses like agrarian sciences could also be handled with this online. I'm sure that a blended combination of this digital pedagogy with the practical exposure is going to make the difference. Thanks to the Prime Minister's program of recent program of eVidya and Diksha, they're all quite supportive for framing the plans for agrarian sectors also. And recently, the Association of Indian University President also has assured that subsequently the development of the pedagogy, the formation of the virtual medias would be in favor of these classes. So I'm sure that the initiation of the Best IU has certainly has become a pioneering effort. The faculty and students and the management have certainly taken note of the prospects of this program in days to come. And with this happy note, I'm sure that the speakers have gotten an insight and a background of how Best IU is now taking these initiatives in the forefront. Well, with this, I certainly, expect the, galaxy of the experts to highlight us as to what should be the, further refinements, redefinements we can formulate into our, roadmap preparation. Thank you, Vinanda.
Thank you, Dr. D.L. Maheshwar. It was wonderful listening to you. And just to keep it on record, we have Ambassador Debbie here. She's senior most. I would like to welcome her formally. We have Ambassador Alice here, and I think Dr. Ayla Al-Jufri had an issue joining in earlier. So I would like to formally welcome Dr. Ayla Al-Jufri also, with a little announcement that the part 11 to part 20, which will start from next Saturday, will now cater to the theme of global food security and agriculture technology. So we'll have 10 parts starting from next Saturday, purely on agricultural technology and global food security. With that, I call on our Senior Director, Shazil Ahmed, to take over as moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rupa Vasudevanji and Dr. D.L. Maheshwarji. You truly set the tone for the event. I think you made my job easier. I can directly get into inviting the speakers whom we are all eager to hear from. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to mention one thing, that we are live right now on Facebook and YouTube. Kindly, you can share the link and tweet about it with your followers. So I would like to now invite our first speaker for the day. That is Dr. Suhas Wani, the former Director and Research Program Asia for ICRISAT. He has worked as a visiting professor in Department of Soil Science, University of Alberta during 1989 to 1991. Also, he has worked as the International Rice Research Institute consultant. Dr. Wani has contributed to the creation of Bhuchetena initiative in Karnataka, a strong partnership that reached 4.75 million farmers in 5 years. I request Dr. Suhas Wani ji to address the conference.
Thank you. And let me screen sharing. Can you please open it for me?
You can share the screen, sir. You have a green button in the center. Click on.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, thank you very much. And let me thank the Honorable Chancellor, Madam Rupaji, as well as the Vice Chancellor and Mr. Manmohan Singh and other dignitaries, as well as my fellow speakers. What I will be discussing today is basically technology adoption in agricultural education during COVID-19. What are our challenges and opportunities are there? As you see in the picture on the top, it is the oldest university in the world, which was in India. And that's where basically we should take pride in that. And we need to regain that status as such for the benefit of millions of farmers, as shown in the down slide of the opening presentation, that we have a lot of challenges of managing the water, soil, food security, nutrition, and that's where our small farm holders, who are about 147 million at the moment, are our annadatas, and we need to really do something better for that initiative. So when we talk of education, let us see what is the process education is. It is the process of facilitating learning or the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, beliefs, and habits. That means it is not only what we learn in the colleges or in the schools is the education, but the whole process of learning, acquiring the knowledge, skills, values is a process of education. And educational methods can include teaching, training, storytelling, discussion, as well as directed research. It can be formal or informal. And today I will be discussing more on the informal settings of the education for the farmers as such. As indicated earlier, we had Takshashila University, which was Cambridge of India, known 500 before Christ era, and that's the standing what India had thousands of years back. Let us look at why agricultural education and what digital agriculture can do for us. As we know that during COVID-19, agriculture is the only sector showing green shoots of economy. In spite of that, the agriculture was the worst sufferer or most vulnerable sector during the COVID-19 because manufacturing sector lost only the process of manufacturing, but the agriculture lost what they had the production already done for over 4 months. That was at the risk, and that is where we need to take care. But again, as usual, the agriculture sector has bounced back and it has recorded almost 4% of growth over the last years of production. So we need to understand that there are large yield gaps. Although India has the largest arable land in the world, but at the same time, our yields are very, very low as compared to the world agriculture. And this is mainly as shown in the graph on the right side, that the top line in the long-term experiment shows that average productivity of rain-fed agriculture is about 5.1 tons if we manage with the appropriate new technologies adoption. Whereas the bottom line shows when the farmers manage their land, that produces only 1.1 ton, which supports only 5 persons per hectare per year, as compared to 27 persons with the improved management. So when this is the background and our 54% of land is rain-fed agriculture, and the irrigated agriculture also has reached a plateau and it is on a declining trend now for the yields, we need to really harness the technologies to address the issues of the farmers. Farmers have no access to the extension agencies, and this is not as my personal opinion. This is the National Sample Survey shown that 59% of farmers in India do not get any extension support. The current government machinery is able to provide only support to the 11% of the farmers, and remaining farmers are served by the dealers, media, private agents, and the CSOs. So that's where basically our challenge is, that how we are going to address the lack of knowledge and the new technologies are taken to the doorstep of the farmers. And scientists, extension staff, as well as the civil society organization staff need to be empowered to handle the digital agriculture and take it to the farmers' doorstep. India has the ability, also has the technology and knowledge to do it. And of course, Government of India is pushing forward for unified platform for the farmers, as there are several of the sites as well as the platforms being developed. Why Indian farmers are poor? When we look at that, most of the stressed population in the country is our poor farmers, and which are the cause of concern because lakhs of them have committed suicide over the last 5 years. The reality, which is very, very sad, that the farmer who takes the production basically is getting only 40% of the price paid by the consumer, and the intermediaries who are taking the produce from the farmers are the one who are harnessing 60 to 70% of the retail price. So in this sense, we have to take into consideration that farmer is the only producer in the world who cannot fix the price of his produce, but has to buy all the needed material at the price fixed by the producers of that material, let it be fertilizers, pesticides, or extension support, or insurance, or anything. Whatever farmer buys has to buy at the price fixed by the producers. But when he wants or she wants to sell his produce or her produce, then the price is fixed by the other agencies, not by the farmer himself or herself. So what we need is better, faster, and cheaper delivery through digital agriculture, because 95% of the rural people have these cell phones with them. We need to really harness this particular positive aspect of the Indian strength that 95% of our rural people have the cell phones, maybe 20-25% maybe smartphones, but definitely the children of the farmers also have the smartphones. So we need to harness this by increasing the adoption rate through collaborative bidirectional feedback loops resulting into the farmer prefer products and services. So it should be demand driven rather than the supply driven. It should be faster, so it should be dynamic. On the same time, within few hours, the farmer should be able to get the solution and reduce the development and delivery time for new or knowledge, varieties, technologies, and cycle of innovation. It should be cheaper because basically we need to look at the bottom of the pyramid where almost 92% of the farmers are at the bottom of the pyramid who have less than 2.5 acres of land. And that's where we need to ensure that whatever the technology we develop, it is cheaper along with better and faster. When we have these products or services, definitely will increase the smallholder farmers' productivity, profitability by linking them with the market, getting more share, providing gains in poverty reduction through the value addition, and of course, improve the nutrition, education, and the savings of the farming community. Use of ICT in agriculture has been tried in the country quite a lot. There are at least more than 100 platforms.
Do you have 1 minute to go, sir?
Yeah, and we need to ensure that the farmers are provided the right sort of knowledge. For example, Microsoft and ICRISAT had developed the sowing app without having any sensors, without having anything, just the information about the location of the farmer. Farmer can be guided when he or she should plant their crops. And definitely the 21st century belongs to the young India. Let us turn our dream into reality by harnessing the technology and helping the millions of small farmers where the current technologies are not able to reach. And that's where basically we need to bring in the high-tech agriculture at the doorstep, and through farmer producer organizations as envisaged by the government of India, lot of things can be achieved, scale of operation can be managed, and new technologies can benefit the farmers. Thank you very much. Back to the organizers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok Wani, sir. So we wanted to hear you much longer, but we are limited by the availability of time because we have a lot of other speakers. So I think thank you very much for throwing light on the informal education of the farming community, which constitute for the large part of the population in India. I think your call for knowledge, lack of knowledge, and new technology initiatives that should reach our annadatas, right, in form of demand-based production, and also increasing their equity in access to technology by making it more cheaper. And also, I think the innovation, or rather the application you spoke about was very interesting, sir, where based on the location, using a simple app, we are able to, you were able to guide the farmers. So I think that actually will help a lot of people in case if they can pick from that and implement. Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok Wani, Suhas Wani sir, for addressing the conference.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I would like to invite our next speaker for the day. That is Dr. Samirandu Mohanty, the Asia Regional Director at International Potato Center, CIP. He has worked as a principal scientist at International Rice Research Institute in Philippines. He brings over 20 years of experience with skills in research management, fundraising, commodity markets, research funding, asset management, policy, and trade analysis. I request Dr. Samirandu Mohanty ji to address the conference.
Thank you, Sajil. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are logging in from. This is now, we have to say good afternoon, morning, evening, all the time now. This is virtual now. First of all, let me thank the organizer, particularly Dr. Maheshwar Rupaji, and best to you, the university, for inviting me to come to this webinar. And it's my absolute pleasure. I'm actually logging in from Manila, Philippines here. For the last 5 months, I've been somewhat quarantined and not been traveling because of the pandemic here. And let me just start saying that this is such a timely topic. I think Rupaji mentioned the whole thing have been put on us immediately. You know, without we didn't have a lot of choice in terms of how to deliver the education, how to deliver any of these things there. So it has been imposed upon us by external invisible agent. So we all know that the ICT is in development for last 20 years. The technology development part has seen some exponential growth in the past 2 decades. And you look at UNICEF, European Unions, US, a lot of organizations, they have been advocating to use of ICT to deliver, particularly in the education sector, and attract that non-traditional adult students and other non-traditional students into the sphere of education, so that we can broaden our education sector there. Now information is easily accessible from wherever, everywhere. Today I was thinking I was supposed to drive somewhere. I thought I can do this webinar while driving. I really can do it. So it is that easy now to reach rest of the world, wherever you are, at the fingertip there. So we are developing this technology. One side, the technology development has pushed ahead. But if you look at the other side, the users, particularly the educators, the other users of this ICT tool in educations, they have fallen behind. The adoption part from the educator side is very low. So far, it has been very low before the pandemic there. So there were a lot of, if you look at the literature, a lot of discussion how to make the educators adopt technology, or particularly the ICT tool to deliver the education there. And a lot of discussion how to do it. I guess that is now has been put to rest. The pandemic has put that to rest, saying that we have to use it. There is no other alternative there in terms of not using technology or ICT tools or any of these platforms to deliver what you want to deliver there. So that part is completely done now. Now we have to use it. Even after pandemic, it's not going away. We are not going back to an old normal. We are going back to new normal. As I think Rupaji mentioned, is some sort of blended or hybrid model will be adopting going forward there. I think the education will not be the same from after the pandemic. I don't think we are going back to that old one anymore. We are going back to a new normal, like everything in life. We are going back to a new normal. Same thing, education delivery. We are going back to a new normal there. Absolutely no doubt in that. My experience, I'm saying, I travel a lot extensively. So like more than 200 days a year. And I used to think that these travels are necessary for doing my job there. And I haven't traveled for the last 4 months. But that life is going on, and also activities are going on all across the world. Nothing has stopped because I'm not traveling. I think things have adjusted. We are adjusting to the new normal there, and we are doing our job the best we can given the circumstance. Luckily, before the pandemic, technology, as I said, the technology development was ahead of us. We are behind in terms of catching up with the technology. And so it was much easier for us to use the technology because the technology development was already there. I'll just give you an example. Day before yesterday, from UHS, Dr. Maheshwar's previous old campus, we started a project with Dr. Chengappa and Dr. Maheshwar to develop this very high-tech tissue culture, potato seed multiplication using this tissue culture polyhouse. And it's a very, very, very nice technology. Yesterday, the team in Bangalore, they were supposed, our team from Georgia, supposed to come to Bangalore to learn this particular technology this month. Because of all these travel restrictions, they could not come. So that they connected to virtually, and the whole training of seed multiplication using this upscale upstream research was delivered using virtually. And it was very good. I think it was as effective as if they would have come to Bangalore and sat there for 7 days and learned with the people there, side by side. I think the effectiveness of these particular delivery methods is equally good. I think that we will continue to adjust and improve, but I really don't see we have before we used to go to village for the farmers, training for the stakeholders in terms of production practices, other training there. We have not been doing that. We are now doing it virtually to the farmers, hundreds of farmers, probably at least 50 to 100 trainings my team has delivered within India. to the farmers, to other stakeholders, extension agent there. And they have been equally effective in terms of production practices. It's not the theoretical, it's a very practical applied training where farmers immediately take it to the field, use it in the field there. We have been equally effective there. What, as a manager, what I've seen that this has saved me time, this has saved us money, and also we are much more effective in terms of delivering this particular technology. So once the pandemic is over, I'm not saying that we will be only doing training virtually, but we will be adopting a hybrid model. Instead of going to the farmers 10 times a season, we'll probably go there for 2-3 times, and the 4-5 times we'll do probably virtually. Before, we used to not think, although the technology was with us, we never thought we can deliver that to the farmers virtually and without any sort of problem there. But now we know that it is effective and it can be done. So we are going back to this new normal where my suite of training module will involve part of them virtually, part of them going physically and talking to the farmers there. So this is very new normal what I'm mentioning there. There are some concerns there. If I am doing training to the farmers, adult education is okay. But my concern goes back to the education, primary education, secondary education, high school, and the college, even undergraduate level. We all graduated through these traditional methods. If we go back, what we will lose if we would have not gone to school, everything done, most of the things done virtually there. We go to school or colleges not to learn academic skill. We also go there to a lot of other skills we learn, social skill, budgeting skill. If you go back and remember your student life, you learned how to live in a month 500 rupees. I lived in Bangalore for 4 years, probably 300 to 500 rupees per month. That's where I learned my budgeting skill, how to manage my money there. Okay, so there are a lot of other things we learn, social skills, friendship. If you go back, a lot of all the friends you made, if you take that out of the picture, make everything virtual, we'll lose out that thing. I think this is a big part of that. We need to be aware of that before moving on to the virtual training thing. We need to make sure we come up with the methods where we don't lose this non-academic skill which we used to learn from the school there. I think the key is that the new normal will look different from the old normal, and new normal will be blended, hybrid, as you say, that somehow we'll mix it up. The technology adoption will be much more faster in the education sector than what we have seen in the past, because we'll always be worried that there might be another pandemic on the horizon. We need to stay ahead in this race as an educator, as an institute, so that there is no shock to the system there. I think that is something we'll be exploring, we'll be inventing or developing as we get out of this pandemic and go to this new thing there. And other things I would like to focus in this thing is the education has become very expensive.
1 more minute to go, sir.
Last point. Education is very expensive. Even in India, for one student, you probably need around 1 crore rupees, at least. If you from the primary education to the college level, that's the amount we need for one student there. I just wonder if this hybrid model will make education accessible to people. That's one part. Will it make cheaper? Will this model make it cheaper because the students don't have to stay in campus throughout the year? The educators don't have to come to the campus throughout the year. Will that make it cheaper? I think that is something need to be seen. I'm just giving an example. My son goes to Purdue. Now, the next semester, if you decide to go to campus, there's a different tuition. If you decide to take course online, there's a different tuition fee there. So they have already decided that if you decide to take it online, it is cheaper. But I think that market price has not been developed fully. I eventually see there were two-tier price system for the students, depending on what they want to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dr. Sam Mohanty ji, for addressing the conference. So, you started by saying the world moves on and we are in for a new normal. It is, and you mentioned that it is very important to bring the non-traditional learners to expand the education ecosystem, right? The hybrid method of delivery to farmers is something which I think everyone will take a cue from. I think something which you have already implemented. And on a lighter note, your budgeting skills is the need of the hour. I think a separate session on that would be really helpful. Also, I think a very important point you mentioned, sir, is that we need to be prepared for new pandemic, right? We need to have more contingency plans in place. I think that was a call I think which everyone will take a cue from. Thank you very much, Dr. Sam Mohanty ji, for addressing the conference. It was a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Ashok Dalwai ji, the CEO of National Rainfed Area Authority in the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare and Government of India. Dr. Ashok Dalwai is a member of Indian Administration Service and has served the state of Odisha and Karnataka. He has also contributed to the first agriculture policy of Odisha state. I request Mr. Ashok Dalwai ji to address the conference.
I find myself like a square peg in a round hole here. I see that I am sprinkled amidst the educationists, and I see that topic for today is technology in education. And that's really not my forte, but let me make a loud thinking over the next, how many minutes is it for me? Okay.
So you have 10 minutes. Yes.
All right. Okay. So let me make a loud thinking over the 10 minutes. First is that technology brings about a fundamental structural change wherever it is applied. And education is not an exception. There are several opportunities and advantages that a technology brings. And it breaks down, it disrupts the existing social structure, and that's the biggest advantage. It is, as P.N. Bhagwati talked about, bottom of the pyramid, where we need to reach out to the largest section of the society who have been left out of the pale of education, social development, economic transformation. And technology is something that can help us to reach out to this large section of the society in quick speed of time. I start with this context only to make it clear that when we talk about education, it is possible that we get blindfolded by the formal educational system that leads to degrees and certificates. We must be looking at education, which means transformation of the society, which means manifestation of the best that exists in every individual, but it has not got manifest only because he or she has been deprived of access to education. Hence, I would say that while we do take care of the formal educational system, starting from the kindergarten to the universities, we also look at a larger section of the society that lives outside, and they need to be continuously educated. And we talk of education in more tangible forms, we're talking about upgrading knowledge, changing their skills, their attitude, motivation level, so that the demography of any society, be it a nation or a globe, becomes a productive component of the transformation that is required for the humanity and the life at large. I would therefore like to draw your attention that how do we build that technology platform, including the equipments and devices and the other kinds of platforms required to carry this knowledge through quick diffusion from the source to the sink. And when we talk of the sink here, we are talking about, for example, the first section illiterate class, which is pretty large in countries like India and Africa. And we had the experience Saksharata mission in the 1990s, where we did try to motivate the people to become themselves educators. For example, my friend Bharatlal Mina is sitting here. He was leading a Saksharata mission in one of the districts. So likewise, now we have the backing of the technology to lead the minimum literacy that is required to reach out to the large section of the society. And then there are specific skills for industry class, entrepreneur class, agricultural class, landless agriculture class, who need to be offered definitive skills so that they become self-bred winners. So what kind of technology do we use to reach out to skill transformations? Women in particular, for example, whether they are working at home or outside the home, they are a part of the working population. So what kind of devices do we use? What kind of content do we build to transfer knowledge and skills and attitude to the women folk of this country. And then, of course, there are several situations. Since we're talking about technology in education during COVID time, the COVID advantage, in a sense, vicariously is it has highlighted the importance of technology. It has highlighted the importance of an alternate means of reaching out to people. That is the only thing. Now, COVID, for that matter, has brought out that yes, universities, educational institutions, governments, and all professional bodies can adopt technology. Technology is something of which many people in India are scared of. There are people whose hands may shudder even to touch the mouse, for example. Now, technology, this COVID has forced people to get more friendly to this. So these kind of contingencies could be a pest and disease attack for the farmers, could be a health contingency for the population. It could be a natural calamity arising from floods and droughts or a tsunami. And under all these circumstances, the governments and the policymakers need to reach out to a large section of the society with real-time advice and there how to use technology. These are all parts of education. That's the point I'm trying to highlight. And alongside this, there's something called ethics. We day in and day out, for example, today we see various religious leaders, yoga teachers, they're all teaching certain things. And society first requires ethics. So how does technology help in carrying this ethics to the people, including the students in particular, because the young minds need to be filled not with just information and knowledge and skills and attitude, but the ethical part of it so that they become ethical members of the society. I did tell about the P.N. Bhagwati's bottom of the pyramid, where we must always look at what technology can do. The biggest advantage, I must reiterate, it is secular, it is neutral, it is gender neutral, it is class neutral, it is religion neutral, it is poor neutral, it is neutral in every sense, including it is neutral in case of scale. Unlike many other physical modes of transfer, the technology helps us to reach out to large sections of the society in quick speed of time, in real time. And to that extent, the scales of operations are broad, and therefore the productivity of the people involved, the teacher involved, the content involved, the technology involved, the investments involved, all become multiple times. And we must therefore take advantage of this, particularly in a country like India, with large geographical area and dense population of 130 crore and still growing. And then I was talking to you how in the formal education system, because that's of course the core ultimately, that in the formal education system, as we move from kindergarten to the university level, as we move from the general education to the professional education, as you move from the physical sciences to the social sciences, every single discipline requires a specific treatment. So what now we need is that in the teachers training schools, in the B.Ed courses, all other courses, all professional colleges, where the teaching content is developed, where pedagogy is developed, where the teaching methodologies are developed, we now need to look afresh, because the technology is now onwards going to supplement our physical transfer of system. It's not that it is going to substitute, because education also involves transforming by being an example. A teacher is an example, a mother is an example, a father is an example, a school is an example. So we can't have an impersonal relation all the time. Technology in a way keeps the distance between the source and the sink. Hence we would be having interactive forces. However, how do we combine the physical, that is manpower, and this technology in such a way that we harvest the advantages of complementary relations that exist? My own generation, for example, we began with projectors, where slides are projected as a teaching aid. And then we have moved on to the PowerPoint presentations, and we have now moved on to the internet system. The revolution that happened in technology was in the 20th century, where what in the computers, where we moved away from the analog system to the digital system. Now, digital system has enabled us to convert every bit of information into a digital node, and therefore the digital power. Let me take a concrete example. If you take agriculture, for example, where we thought the market is an assembling point, where we could also tell them how to conduct themselves. Today, the farmer doesn't have to come to an APMC. The farmer can conduct his transaction from his farm gate using the virtual online trade platform. This is the power of our digital technology. So now, using the power of digital technology, how do we see that everybody comes on board. So I'll take 1 minute and close it. I think you are now, there's not much of a time. So what I would like to say is that if we need to now move on to technology, we need to look at 2 or 3 things. First, in India, for example, we have 800 million mobile sets, and approximately half of them are smartphones. Now, the ease with which we can reach out to people will depend upon the access that our communities have either to the World Web, that is internet platforms, and therefore this kind of a mode, the mode that you and I are using today is possible, or we use the smartphones and therefore large number of applications can be developed. And those who don't have, of course, the basic phone users will have to still depend upon SMSs. And then the fourthly, of course, the personal calls through the Kisan calls, for example, in agriculture. What we now need to do is how in India we strengthen our broadband connectivity so that the last mile infrastructure is built. We go from 3G to 4G and finally 5G, so that the speed of transfer is clearer and more accurate and quick, and it is much more integrity. It is much more integral. I'm sorry, in terms of integrity, it is very robust. And we therefore need to look at this particular infrastructure. Now we need to move just away from hardware infrastructure like national highways and district roads to the broadband infrastructure, smartphones, then the worldwide web connectivities. So all these things become important. The last point I would like to highlight is that all of us need to get friendly with this technology. Under the Digital India program, where there are 9 pillars, every single pillar is trying to look at one particular component. If we want, for example, digital financing to happen, we need to educate our people how to transact financially on the digital mode. So every single thing is a new avenue. So our educators need to redesign themselves, reorient themselves. The professors need to reorient themselves. They need to develop that kind of a literature. They need to develop that kind of a approach to interact with the students. So let me end up by saying that we need to supplement and complement the manpower and the technology to the advantage of our people, particularly the students, where we shift from reactive mode of teaching learning to interactive mode, from passive mode of learning to more of aggressive learning, because technology helps the teacher to carry the students from outside the class to anywhere in the world and have an access, particularly now the 3D technology is coming. So thank you very much, and I will stop here, and I will look forward to listening to others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok Talwai, for addressing the conference, sir. So you presented some important points, which I think we need to take cue from. So you mentioned that wherever technology is applied, it changes the structure of traditional learning. So the best example, I mean, I would like to highlight is the Best Innovation University. You would be really happy to know we have not missed even a single class since the day the first lockdown was announced, because we were prepared technologically and under the guidance of Sri Bharatlal Minaji. I think you mentioned his name during your talk. Also, sir, there's a common point which was addressed throughout this conference by the speakers, is that the informal sector, the sector which is non-traditional, that doesn't have access to education, bringing them into this loop. And also you emphasized on education of women who are at home. I think with the technology which you mentioned, that which is gender neutral, which is caste neutral, which is color, creed neutral, this is possible. And also the 3 important points which you mentioned, I think everyone would take cue from, sir, and develop solution based on that. I thank you very much for addressing the conference, Dr. Ashok Talwai. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I would like to invite our next speaker, that is Dr. P.G. Chengappa, the ex-Vice Chancellor of University of Agriculture Sciences, Bangalore. He has over 3 decades of experience in teaching, research, extension, and academic administration. He has been a consultant to several international organizations, including International Food Policy Research Institute, Washington. Currently, he is on the board of SAM Agritech Limited, SAM Agri Ventures Limited, and Tasty Bite Eatables Limited. I request Dr. P.G. Chengappa ji to address the conference.
Thank you, Sajil Ahmad ji. Certainly, it is a great pleasure to be part of this webinar, and I also immensely thank Rupa Vasudevan and Dr. Maheshwar for arranging this webinar, which is really useful. Friends, I think, I should mention of the nearly 40 years of my experience in teaching, I spent about 30 years, making use of the chalk and talk. Now, in the recent years, I've been involved in, sort of online teaching experience. So today, I'll be sharing how effective an online teaching and learning experience based on my own experience. Certainly, all of you agree that COVID is leading to a sort of a revolution in education, and e-education has become a norm. And the COVID pandemic has necessitated closure of colleges and universities across the globe, necessitating online education. All of us we are familiar with e-marketing, e-auction, e-education, so on. And this COVID should be seen as an opportunity to transform our education system. Now, with this changed situation, parents have now become teachers. Teachers have become distance educators. Home has become the new classroom. So certainly, we need to, adjust to ourselves, or I must use the word, the real transformation. We should be, we should make use of this. The COVID-19 upended the social connection between students and teachers, which was pointed by some previous speakers. Certainly, we miss the casual interactions, discussions, pre and post classroom questions, debates, sports events, group activities, a diversity in the classroom, and the inclusion, etc. So this is a part of the transformation that is happening. Universities and faculty grapple with the shift to online education system. Strategies to maintain student-faculty connection should be a top priority, because in the online, the connection is literally it's all virtual. So certainly a change for students and teachers is certainly difficult. That too, this quick and unexpected change is much more difficult. So I want just to say, now we have one side the online learner, then on the other side the online teacher, the online person who is conducting the online teaching. So coming to the online learner, students are responsible for planning, organizing, and directing their own learning and create their own classroom environment. Certainly, this is the responsibility of the student, and we should see that they are tuned to that. They have to manage complex mixture of learning and management systems, internet, course materials, and own electric devices. This is their responsibility. Otherwise, they will not be able to establish the connectivity. They must abide by some basic ethics. That is, they should be punctual. They should take it serious, and they should see that it's it has to be more serious than a classroom lecture hearing. Then, of course, he should not solely dependent on online teaching. This is the crux of the online. See, he should have interactions with other students, interaction with the tutor and the teacher. But if you look at I was looking at certain studies. What is the perception of the online learner? The perception is mixed. Some indicating online modules as positive, while an equal number rated them as marginally negative. I don't want to give the reasons here, there's no time. A blend of online and traditional approaches was preferred by science-based students, and there are this kind of opinion across the subjects, across the faculties. The limitation is organizing practical classes, organizing experiential learning programs, and hands-on training, etc., was indicated by many students. Well, we may say that we can have simulation models, but the simulations have its own limitations. Now I come to the online teacher, where I just mentioned I've also moved from chalk and talk to this online for last few years, because this has become a necessity. Teachers who teach online courses face unique challenges. They're tasked with delivering course content, helping students to navigate technology, engage students in discussion, monitoring student progress, encouraging perseverance, providing timely and feedback, and fostering interaction between students. So online teacher must be flexible, responsive, and committed to engaging and retaining their students. This is very important concept because they have to see that the students really respond. Be available and anticipate questions. If students could always do their work on their own, why would they need teachers? So this should be in our mind that we should be able to answer the questions as and when needed. Teachers must update courses regularly to ensure they remain relevant and interesting. What can teachers do to identify or support struggling or slow online learners who are being swept up in this tide? Now, certainly keep in mind there are slow learners in any class. This has to be kept in mind in online teaching. Coming to the focus of the university and faculty, see, for example, where the Honorable Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor of the best university are more interested, we must aim at creating a virtual campus and a virtual community of people caring about them. This is very, very top, should be top in our mind. Need to adopt an education system in tune with the digital era. Mix of classroom, open and distance learning, massive open online courses like the MOOC, all this should be used, it should be in combination. So only online has its own limitations. There are UGC, guidelines, and there is a UGC online courses or programs. Regulations of 2018 should be followed because this is mandatory for any university. If they are awarding degrees, this is a must. Use social media to complement your online communication. Find your own platform of choice. It may be Instagram and it may be Twitter, but both are different. In Instagram, you can go for more pictures, designs, etc. But in Twitter, only words. Then target a whole student development. See, for example, many of the teachers think that just give a lecture on the market efficiency and be done away with it. That doesn't serve the purpose. We should keep always in mind that the whole student development should be out. Then build a discipline of co-education space. This is also very important for a university now. You should have a co-education space. Share your discipline-specific content and analysis on the external event. Then we must really see the student success. The student placements, students getting fellowships, students' achievements. This has to be seen. Then the question comes: will online education work in India? Because this is ideally, it has been debated. I was looking at a study by Mukhopadhyaya based on the National Sample Survey data, where he argues that only 27% of the households have some internet. And in states such as West Bengal and Bihar, only 7 to 8% of the rural households have hardly any access to the internet. The rural areas are worsted, not only in terms of internet, but power supply also. So what happens is the question of inclusiveness, equity, and access to education is being jeopardized in this kind of situation. So we must really ensure, and it is the responsibility of the university to see that equal opportunity is provided in this online system. Then, of course, my last thing is, what is the future of this kind of, the whole future of learning? Online classroom education have their own merits and demerits depending upon the requirement of students, which was indicated by other speakers also. For universities, hybrid pedagogy should be the long-term goal, which was again emphasized by the previous speakers. Integrate online units into traditional classroom delivered courses based on learner characteristics, course content, and the learning content. This also should be kept in mind. Right combination to... Hello?
So you have 1 minute to go, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I will make it. Thank you. Right combination to attract students, because certainly, education is also a demand-driven, market-driven. And you see, many students cannot afford expensive course fees, staying in campus, even traveling to campus from cities, etc. For others, studying full-time class or career responsibilities or raising young family, etc., come in the way. So we must have a system of, a sort of a demand-driven approach. Then keeping pace with, we also must ensure real life teachers still play a vital role in educating next generation of students. I always believe guru is a guru, and the guru has his own qualities. Guru has his own inherent abilities, and this quality of the guru should be imbibed. But this is not just by online teaching. By observing the guru also we learn a lot of things. So I conclude stating focus on integration rather than wholesale replacement should be the answer. Only online will not survive. A hybrid model will survive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. P.G. Chengapaji, for addressing the conference, sir. So you broke down all the points in very structured and easy way in form of advice to students, to teachers, and to universities. Right? You also quoted research about the connectivity, the equity in connectivity, which I think Dr. Ashok Galwai sir also mentioned that there is connectivity issue and how to solve that. I think Dr. Rupa Vasudevan mentioned in the start. I think we need to explore hybrid mechanisms such as satellite learning, along with a mixture of broadband education, in order to make this more accessible. Thank you very much, sir, for addressing the conference, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
On that note, thank you, sir. On that note, I would like to invite our next speaker for the day, Ms. Shinta Vitoyo Dhanuvardoyo. She's a founder of Nusantara Venture and Bubu.com. Shinta Vitoyo is an Indonesian businesswoman, a digital activist, and an angel investor. She has initiated the Bubu Award, Web Design and Digital Marketing Awards, and Pesta Blocker. And she has also been selected as Inspiring Women of 2013 honor roll by Forbes Indonesia magazine. I request Ms. Shinta to address the conference now.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'll be probably touching base about how technology in crisis, and maybe touch a little bit on education as well. So as we know that this pandemic has affected everybody globally, and from the economy as a macro and to the businesses, tech startup as a micro as well. I myself has actually been in the tech industry for about 24 years now. I started in '96, and now I'm mostly doing mentoring to the tech startups and also a little bit of angel investing, because previously I was also a venture capitalist, but now I'm more doing my own investment and helping a startup through mentorship. And in Indonesia, the government have launched multiple public health and economic responses, from quantitative easing to civil emergency policy during this pandemic. And with so many uncertainties in the market, one sure thing is that us in the tech and business landscape, we have to focus on two things: how to survive the current situation, and we need to also think beyond coronavirus, like the path of the new normal. That's how people call it these days. So speaking from that standpoint of tech, surviving the current situation is about showing your adaptability, I think, right? For instance, like the clothing factory, it can shift its focus, instead of they're producing the regular clothing, they start producing also, the masks. And I think that's how tech company also should do the same thing. How can you adapt this from the situation right now? So for instance, if you're a travel or experience-based startup, instead of, because not everybody can travel these days. So how can you shift your focus, maybe perhaps to sell content instead? Because, every eyeballs are now on the mobile phone, on the screen of your laptop, on the iPad and all that. So I think trying to adapt, changing, instead of like, if you're, for instance, like I said, if you're a travel startup, maybe you can start thinking how you can introduce contents in your application instead, so people have a new experience. And or if your company is supposed to be doing offline activation, there are so many tools like what we're doing right now, Zoom, Google Hangout, and everything to utilize the online communication. And of course, surviving the current social distancing period comes more naturally for some compared to others. When we talk about health tech, education tech, or cloud-based solution, or the online productivity tools like what we're using today, Zoom, and they're naturally benefiting from the situation actually. So but some other sectors like agri-tech, the P2P lending companies, I think they've also having a surge of traction these days. And so at this current situation, it's a chance actually for all tech companies to show their users, stakeholders, and investor how to adapt and be creative in surviving this difficult time. I myself, since last year, we entered esports, which is a gaming industry. So we didn't know about this pandemic, but the reason why we entered into esports or gaming is because in Indonesia we have about 260 million population, and 90% are gamers, and because we have like 50% of our population below 30 years old, so the young people are actually doing gaming these days. So since we work with a lot of brands, we have to know and understand where the millennials are now, because most of the brands are looking for that target market. So that's why we decided to go into gaming or esports since end of last year. And it actually, we came in at the right time because everybody's playing game while it's the pandemic time these days. So that's one of the thing how we actually was able to survive this difficult time. And I believe those who stand up will gain a massive boost of credibility after the curve has flattened as well, because we're able to adapt and see the new normal. I mean, how do we adapt this new normal? And I think two things to keep in mind. Maybe like at this difficult time may not be all about profit taking, but it actually could be an opportunity to convert new users to use the services or the products that you have. And you can always build a story around it. The second one, like you can do campaigns, CSR, donations. Those are the new activities that we can do while in this pandemic situation. And yeah, we're hoping that this situation actually is going to bring us to a new equilibrium. And I think the crisis has not revealed just vulnerabilities, but opportunities, I think, to improve the performance of businesses, especially when we're talking about tech companies. We also start, needing to consider which costs are truly fixed versus variable, for instance, which has luxuries versus necessity. So a lot of things with this situation, we start thinking of different ways and how to adapt within the company. And if anything, I think social distancing, working from home policy has proved us that digital transformation is definitely doable, and it becomes a necessity. And the situation is pushing the adoption of technology throughout all sectors, especially since tech can drive productivity. And that's the beauty of it. And technologies are so high in accessibility, and that when other resources are unavailable due to the crisis, they become an integral part that, to move your company forwards. And then when we talk about education, in Indonesia, and then when we talk about online education, actually because I was speaking earlier about all these tech companies. Actually 15 out of 20 top tech companies in Indonesia state that hiring local tech talent is very, very hard and very difficult. So when I talk about tech talent, it could be like developers, of course, engineers, artificial intelligence engineers and all that. So we have about 9 million deficit actually in skilled and semi-skilled ICT workers in Indonesia. And this is something we're hoping to work with other countries, maybe with India as well. How can we teach more developers? Like, we need the high skilled developers. And I think like 55% of the graduates in Indonesia, they're not actually ready for the, for the working condition right now, because like there's a mismatch with the graduates and the jobs that are available in Indonesia. So, like I know there's like only 0.8 STEM graduates per 1,000 citizens in Indonesia. So really, really lacking in the developers and programmers in Indonesia. So we're hoping to bring more online study as well, that we can work with other countries or other universities outside of Indonesia that can make can develop more programmers, high skilled programmers for the tech companies in Indonesia. So I think that's all from my side. Really looking forward to hear from the others as well. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shinta, for addressing the conference. I think you presented a view of an investor, a venture capitalist, and in form of an advice to the startup and technology companies globally, right?
Yes,
Points such as developing solutions for millennials and work from home policy were very well noted. Thank you very much, and for addressing the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Sai Kiran. Mr. Sai Kiran is a social activist and a mentor to multiple startup companies. He's also head of strategic partnership for a UK-based company. I request Mr. Sai Kiran to address the conference now. We are having difficulties hearing you.
Hello, once again, Shazin.
Mr. Sai Kiran, I think there's some problem with your microphone. We are unable to hear you.
Am I audible?
Thank you. And we would also request you to switch on the video so that everyone can see you. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll just do. Now I'm audible, I think. Thank you, Sajal, and thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rupa. Thank you, Minaji. I heard a lot of well-experienced people here. I'm not from this forte, but I'll just put forward my views on this subject. I have some connectivity issue. That's the reason I'm not switching the video, but I'll do that. Humans are innately innovative and accommodative. In fact, nothing proves better than our existence itself. COVID-19 crisis, a health calamity which was never witnessed before about a century, is bringing forth our creative resistance and adaptability in ways that are helping us to stay in the fight against the virus. I think myriad of technological developments are defining the present times across the globe. One common among many countries is use of mobile applications for contact tracing of the infected person to isolate those who have been in his vicinity, hence preventing mass spread. Like India, China, Taiwan, Korea have employed this very effectively. There are UVD robots which disinfectant room using ultraviolet light are being widely used in Italy, particularly in hospitals. There are Adams robots manufactured in California kill the viruses through UV rays, but that apart, it also opens and closes doors and moves objects. Its utility in schools, hospitals, shopping malls is very much what can ask for at present. There are CCTVs has been instrumental in contact tracing the prime case to put it to use effectively in the state of Kerala and southern part of India. Video conferencing is turning to be a prime source to interact with families and friends at a time when physical meeting is unavailable. Educators and fitness trainers are also harnessing it to reach to people to mitigate impact of lockdown by providing their services online. Online payments have become increasingly preferable way to get transactions done in view of maintaining social distancing. Those who would have rather evaded the mode of payment due to baseless suspicion adapted to this new reality. Curb to travel long distance led people to online shopping. When it comes to education sector, has been one of the major victims of the pandemic. Closing of schools and colleges has enormously impacted the usual flow of academics. That though could not check our resolve to new findings to minimize the damage, digital way is how we have been able to do it. Especially we are building products on that also. Even at the inception of first phase of national lockdown, many universities and colleges had opted for online classes route to not let academics be interrupted. Among them are both government institutions like IITs and private institutions. A number of e-education platforms like ePG Pathshala, Swayam, NEET are being used by students and teachers. Some institutions are putting their contents in public so that everyone could get benefit from them. Schools have been harnessing applications like Zoom and GoodMeet in very productive fashion by holding regular scheduled meetings. That's online classes, I say. Under the central government guidelines, entrance exams like NTA initiated applications where students can appear for free mock tests and be presented with a detailed evaluation of their achieved score. I feel all these technological adaptations are testament to collective human resourcefulness, creativity, and adaptability, all of which will take us through these challenging times and we come over this tough situation in this pandemic time. That's what I want to put forward, because I heard a lot from other speakers. I don't want to continue from here because all these academics have put the technical side from their point of view. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sai Kiranji, for addressing the conference. I think apart from the technical, you presented a global view of how various countries and industries are leveraging different type of technologies such as mobile, robotics, your automation, your financial, the fintech companies, in they're adapting this to fight the COVID and prepare themselves for the new times. I think that was very well put across, sir. Thank you very much for addressing the conference.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Sai Kiranji. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite our next speaker, Ms. Aditi Shankar. She is a scientist at Aspen Neuroscience, California, USA. She was a research associate at Entrixon Corporation. She is also a scientist in Genia Biocels, US. She was a research intern in Scripps Research Institute. I request Ms. Aditi Shankarji to address the conference now.
Shazil, she is also the president of World Forum for Education for California. Very important.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rupaji. I think I had missed that out. I request Ms. Aditi Shankarji to now address the conference.
Thank you, Sajil. Thank you, Dr. Rupa, for giving me this amazing opportunity to talk with all of you and present some of my ideas. The times we are living in, it's really unprecedented, and the COVID outbreak has been one of a kind, like I discussed in one of the earlier talks. It's forced us to adapt to different ways of working and accelerating the use of technology. As we all know, it's a big challenge to educate and control the spread of the virus and keep everyone safe and healthy. More so because we are fighting a disease that we have never seen before. We don't have any information about it. So fighting becomes even more difficult and different. Different in a way that education is top priority, not only about educating all the students, but educating at a higher level that everyone understands the seriousness of the virus, the seriousness of a pandemic, the seriousness of epidemiologists doing their job. It's costing us human lives every single day. Earlier, it was just like a number of growing cases all around the world. Now it has kind of reached a stage where people in our own close contact or our own circle are infected. Life as we know has come to a pause. People are staying home. Children are not able to go to schools. Doctors are fighting every single day by putting themselves and their loved ones in danger. The global economy is hit so hard that it will probably take several years to recover. Experts are predicting maybe like a V-shaped or a U-shaped or a W-shaped recovery phase, but we don't know. We will have to wait it out and see. But what has technology offered us to adapt through these changes? We've seen that our communities are more together than ever before. It's for the better. We can never, so let me put a thought across. We can never change anything by simply fighting the existing reality with no foresight of the future. To change something, we need to build a system that makes the existing reality obsolete. With COVID in the scenario, we have advanced our technology by 5 years already in a matter of months. Most industries have adopted remote working, as Mr. Sai said earlier. We have made so many changes. We have had, it's not only to IT-based jobs, it's also for banking services. Right now we have touchless payments with our credit cards. Even if you go in store, all you do is tap your card on the payment machine and the transaction goes through. There's telemedicine available. Supply chain management has been come together for consumer and the manufacturer to be more connected. As an example, in the UK, they saw that there was enough supplies available, but the goods weren't reaching the consumers. What did they do to combat this? They brought in all the third-party suppliers together and on the same platform, and they built it in such a way that the consumers are able to access the goods. Education systems have evolved to use remote learning. While this is the need of the hour, there are certain things that, like the ones that our previous speaker said, that we need to have some kind of social interaction. In Thailand, schools have reopened with strict rules of wearing facial masks, having every student with their own bench on shields on all three sides with a glass opening on the front so that they could interact with the teacher. Healthcare is progressing towards telemedicine, where we are diagnosing patients now based on their systems through a video call and asking them to run appropriate tests to get to the crux of the matter remotely. Commercial spaces like malls and other facilities have installed thermal and disinfection stations. Robots are already here. It's not in the near future anymore. It's at the entry to avoid any spread of COVID. It's slowly to reopen the businesses back up to bring the economy to a recovery phase. Airports and airlines are thinking of creative ways to limit the exposure. They're running at 50% capacity. They are maintaining 6 feet distance. They have HEPA filtration systems installed. In manufacturing, they plan to use robotics to limit. Sorry. Okay. So in manufacturing, they are planning to use robotics to limit the exposure of people and to increase social distancing. Restaurants, food deliveries, groceries, everything is on an online platform right now. So what could the future look like? Very soon, we are going to have robots everywhere, including hospitals, for patient care, for medicine and food delivery, for routine monitoring of your heart rate or blood pressure, and for doing COVID and other kind of tests through QR codes. We can really stay home and make machines do things for us now. There are plans to use drones to combat pandemics and outbreaks like COVID-19, for using them so that people who are at home can still be, we can send out drones and collect samples from them to send it to the hospital, run the tests, and have the patients receive the results on their phone app. With all of this accelerated demand for tech, cloud computing, data management, and cybersecurity become very essential. Human connections and interactions are very essential. In 2014, Shri Narendra Modi ji gave recorded speeches using 3D holograms to millions of people in India during his elections. This same technology can now be further advanced to operating live for better human interaction to advanced video calls. There are upsides to the pandemic too. With 80% of the population staying at home, we have reduced carbon emissions, we have reduced accidents, we have reduced crimes, we have more time for ourselves and our loved ones. We are making history every single day. This is our story, our experience, and this will be in the history books for the next generation to learn and adapt. I'm sure we can power through these tough times and come out stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aditi, for addressing the conference. I think you brought out a lot of points in such a short span of time. You spoke about how the communities are now together thanks to the COVID and also the technology. And also you mentioned that we are 4 years ahead in leveraging the technology. On a lighter note, you mentioned that robots are already here. And back in 2005, when I was very new in the industry, I had read an article that the robots are going to take over the world in the future. And if this is how the robots are, they are very much welcome. Thank you very much, Ms. Aditi ji, for addressing the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I would like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Ashok Alurji, the Director for Center of Excellence for Farmer Producers Organizations at Government of Karnataka. He was also, we are very proud to say, he was also our founder Vice Chancellor of Best Innovation University. He has also served as a project coordinator at International Crops Research Institute and Semi-Arctic Tropics. He was a team member in a technical agriculture man ecology for ETC Netherlands. He has published more than 40 articles in reputed journals worldwide. I request Dr. Ashok Alurji to address the conference.
Thank you, Mr. Sajil. Good afternoon to everybody. We have heard several scholarly persons speaking on the subject prior to me, and I would like to throw a little focus on this technology adoption in education during COVID times, with a focus on agricultural education. Friends, we are all aware COVID-19 has resulted in shutdown of several schools, colleges, universities across the globe, and agricultural education institutions are not an exception to this. Globally, over 1.2 billion students in over 186 countries are out of classrooms. As a result, education has changed dramatically with a distinctive rise of e-learning, whereby teaching is undertaken remotely and on digital platforms. With this sudden shift away from the classrooms in many parts of the globe, we are wondering whether the adoption of online learning will continue to persist post-pandemic, and how such a shift would impact the agricultural education system. Even before COVID-19, there was already a high growth and adoption of such system in education technology, with the global edtech investments reaching about $18.66 billion in 2019, and overall market for the online education is projected to reach about $350 billion by 2025. And whether it is language applications, whether it's virtual tutoring, video conferencing tools, or online learning software, there has been a significant surge in the use of all such technologies since COVID-19. However, efforts are very, very minimal. If you look at the agricultural education sector, we have not been very much advanced with regard to e-learning systems, use of ICT technology in teaching and technology transfer. Very few universities have developed, e-learning modules in agriculture and horticulture sectors. I don't find much private sector actors who are into, promotion of e-learning in agriculture. While some believe that the unplanned and rapid move towards the online learning with no training, insufficient bandwidth, and little preparation has resulted in a poor user experience that is unconducive to sustained growth in agriculture sector. Others believe that the new hybrid model of education in agriculture will emerge with significant benefits. I believe that the integration of information technology in agricultural education will be further accelerated, and online education will eventually become an integral component of agricultural education in the days to come. For those who do have access to right technology, there is an evidence that learning online can be more effective in a number of ways. If you look at some of the research done on this aspect, some research results, they show that on an average, students retain 25 to 60% more material when online compared to only 8 to 10% in the classroom. This is mostly due to the students being able to learn faster in the online system. E-learning requires 40 to 60% less time to learn than in the traditional classroom setting, because students can learn at their own pace. They go back and they can reread it. They can have a relook at it. They can skip it for some time, or sometimes this can also help in accelerating through the concepts that they, as they choose in the system. There are several challenges in e-learning system in agricultural education, because some students without reliable internet access and or technology struggle to participate in the digital learning. This is the practical thing, because we are facing day-to-day basis. This gap is seen across the countries and between, income brackets within countries. Many students may not have even a computer to use. Nevertheless, effectiveness of online learning varies amongst the age groups. The general consensus on children, especially the younger ones, is that the structured environment is required because students are more easily distracted. To get the full benefit of online learning, there needs to be a concerted efforts to provide the structure and go beyond the replicating a physical classroom lecture through video capabilities. Instead, using a range of collaborative tools and engagement methods that promote inclusion, personalization, and intelligence. That's very, very important for the education in agriculture sector. Though no sector has been able to reach 100% adoption of these technologies, vast majority has adopted e-learning methods in their training programs or in their education programs. E-learning in Canadian, European, American, and Australian agriculture even falls significantly behind the current adoption rates seen in non-agricultural sectors, especially in these countries. But if you look at the Indian subcontinent, we are far behind these countries too. The major challenges identified by the researchers inhibiting the expansion of e-learning in agriculture are mainly due to the fact that the agricultural learning is more practical oriented. We always talk about, on the job learning or hands-on skill learning, and thus, hands-on learning is essential in most of the subjects. Wherever practicals are essential, we need to have, an hands-on learning. And most of the subjects in agriculture sector, they emphasize on practical learning methods. If you look at the systems, for example, the gaps between the trainers and the designers. Many times our faculty, we look at faculty as our trainers in this system, and some of the designers who help the faculty to design these modules, there's a major problem lie in the educators' inability to bridge the technical divide. Not only, must they identify the knowledge and skill needed by the students, but they must also figure out how to present the material in an appropriate user-friendly design so that e-learners can translate that information into applicable solutions. The faculty, in most of the cases, they lack the instructional design competencies to develop courses and programs using e-learning applications because they have not been trained in this sector, in this way. Teachers and trainers, in most of the cases, are forced to learn on the job how to present their material using e-learning. They need ongoing support as well as training, and also the administrative support, and maybe certain incentives with a few of these, currently available to the agriculture sector is very, very average or marginal. And if you look at the faculty in agriculture sector, they have faced with several challenges. For example, lack of time and skills needed to adopting to the new technologies, lack of both formalized reward system and the technical support required to do this, and also a concern about the loss of teacher-student relationship in the e-learning system. And also, if you look at the other things, maximizing the returns on their investment in time and money, and major increases in the administrative workload. These are few challenges or difficulties that the faculty in agriculture sector are facing. The agricultural institutions should understand that e-learning is a major investment in their ability to maximize online teaching efficiency and effectiveness in the days to come. As most of the speakers talk about, this is going to be an inevitable component in our regular teaching system. We also need to throw more light and focus onto similar things. Research has also very clearly shown that the electronic communication or information, and even the image technologies, they offer a lot of interesting delivery methods, much more convenient than the
1 minute to go, sir.
method. Yeah. Once they surpass the initial load of administrative skills and all that. And if you look at the ease with which the people are working, converting previously written or prepared educational documents and lectures into online teaching is not terribly difficult. But people, the faculty look at it as a very difficult task. So it is very, very important that a special attention must be paid towards developing links, review questions, connections to data sources and images. This is one of the important aspects. To conclude, the first step of e-learning in agriculture are being taken in most of the countries, and we need to pay more attention. In Indian subcontinent, we have not paid enough attention, or we have not diverted resources and time for making agricultural online more effective through the e-learning systems. While much of the available funding and interest has been geared towards special programs in agribusiness and agriculture management, large number of organizations can join their hands and develop very effective e-learning agricultural tools. So the challenge is to fully exploit the electronic media, maximizing its usefulness to the realm of possible resources. E-learning must not be just simple PowerPoint presentations. They need to be modified into online modules, but rather well-designed training that draws towards the best electronic resources that are available. So the faculty, the administration, and the institutions have to come together, bridge the gaps that is existing in the, making e-learning more effective and impact oriented. Thank you very much, and look forward to hear other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok Alurji. Pleasure hearing you, sir. So you mentioned, you started by a very important point, that the technology in education has been prevalent for a very long period of time. And you rightly highlighted that the $18 billion equity investment in the EdTech space in 2019 is a perfect example of that. It's just that we just got accelerated now due to COVID in leveraging or utilizing the technology. So you also highlighted the challenges and also presented the solutions for the current issues in the agri-based institutions as well as the general educational institutions. I think your call for structured learning mechanism and program design training for faculty is need of the hour, and many institutions are taking a cue of this, and we look forward to have this documented and shared with the world. Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok Alurji, for addressing the conference.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sajid.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I would like to invite Dr. Manmohan Singh Ji, the retired Special Chief Secretary of the Andhra Pradesh government, and the Senior Advisor to the Best Innovation University to present his concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Sajil. Really happy to conclude this 10th webinar conducted by Best Innovation University. I believe Best Innovation University is the only university in the country which has continuously for last 10 weeks conducted webinars on this very important subject of technology adoption in education, which is, as many of the speakers have said here, is thrust upon us suddenly. We were not prepared for it. And it is going to stay in future. It's not going to go away, even if COVID goes. So we have to be ready for future also. So technology adoption is important today, as well as it will be important in future also. So this very important issue has been taken as a subject by Best Innovation University for discussion. Several eminent educationists, senior bureaucrats, scientists, technology experts, industry leaders, and social activists, they have attended these 10 webinars and offered their critical views, both on positive as well as negative side of online teaching and learning. Today, we are happy that very, very eminent people, they have joined this webinar and given their very, very valuable suggestions, their views on this important subject. Dr. Suhas Wani is very reputed agriculture scientist. I know him for last 10 years. We worked together in Andhra Pradesh in primary sector mission, and we have been a very big beneficiary of his advice and association with ICRISAT. Dr. Wani has gone into the depth of the issues which the agriculture sector is facing, and it's manifested in several farmers' suicide, which is very, very unfortunate. He has really said knowledge is power. So if we give real knowledge in time to the farmers as to what to be shown, what to be technology to be adopted, how we can process the produce, how we can reach to market, what is the price in the market, all these things, then they can get better value for their produce, and they'll produce what is needed for by the market. So such knowledge can be imparted by technology. So this is how he has emphasized the need for adopting technology in agriculture, in informal education for the farmers. Very, very sound advice you have given, Dr. Wani, and it will really help all the educationists as well as the policy makers in focusing on this aspect of technology. Thank you very much for joining for this webinar. Dr. Sam Mohanty is also a very eminent agriculture scientist. Now he is in Potato Research Center, Vietnam. He spoke from Manila, and he has really touched upon very practical aspects of agriculture skill imparting to the farmers, and he has said how we don't have to go back, because this online teaching, online practical skill imparting has to stay, and there is no going back on it. Therefore, we need to develop very effective system, and hybrid methodology, as he has suggested, will be the best way to reach to the farmers as well as students. what he has said is the main concern is about life skill learning, social skills, which we used to learn in the classrooms, that will probably be missing, and we need to really focus on it and how hybrid methodology can bring it back. So this is very important suggestion, Dr. Mohanty. Really, we are grateful to you that you have joined for this webinar today. Our senior bureaucrat, Sri Ashok Dalwai ji, we are really grateful to you, sir, that you joined. You have taken time out, and today you have addressed all of us. And very, very important suggestion you have given, how in this change situation, in the new normal, how we can empower our teachers, how we can develop the pedagogy, how we can give new look to the contents and content delivery so that it's more useful and more interactive. So you have touched upon various aspects, so many things, but you finally recommended interactive kind of teaching and learning, smartphones and internet, where it is available. Where it is not available, we can go for simple method like SMS and phone calls. That will help a large number of people. Very, very nicely you have given about the advantages of Digital India initiative by the Government of India. Really, your suggestions are very praiseworthy, sir. We will make a record of it and make a part of our report, which we are going to share with all the stakeholders. Dr. Chengappa, ex-VC of University of Agriculture Sciences, Bangalore. Sir, you have given very, very important aspect of developing virtual campus. And that is the need for the future. And we need to also follow UGC regulation, as you said. In 2018, they have given the regulation. And what you said, our target should be whole student development. That is what is the final aim of the education. Very good suggestion you have given, sir. Thank you very much for joining for this webinar. Ms. Shinta from Indonesia, she has indirectly touched upon survival of the fittest principle given by Darwin. So in the change situation, it's very difficult to survive. So her company has gone into the gaming business. And what she said is about 90% of the youngsters, they are doing this gaming. So to survive, you need to change. You have to shift to the new things, new normal. So therefore, this is very good learning from this challenge which the COVID has thrown upon us. So we need to be flexible and adapt to the situation so that we can survive. Very good suggestion you have given, Ms. Shinta. Thank you for joining for this webinar. Coming to Sai Kiran, a social activist. He is based at Hyderabad right now. He has given various aspects of online education and how we need to utilize various technology available with us and cope with the situation. And finally, he, as an optimist, he is saying that Achhe Din will definitely come. Good days are ahead. We will definitely have Achhe Din in future. I am thankful to you, Sai Karanji, for joining for this webinar. Then Ms. Aditi Shankar from USA, neuroscience scientist. Really, you feel the pulse as well as the nerve of what technology can do. You have spoken so much about robots, the use of drones, cloud computing, and also 3D hologram, what our Prime Minister used during campaigning. If that is used for interactive education, it's a really very good, fantastic idea. And you have also said that we have more time for family, we are spending more time, and we are also creating history every day. And this will be a learning thing for the future. Very good suggestion you have given, Ms. Aditi ji. Thank you very much for joining for this webinar. And finally, Dr. Ashok Alur, the Director of Center for Excellence in Karnataka, who was the founder, Vice Chancellor of Best Innovation University. You have also spoken many things about online education and said that it is the agriculture education which is suffering. You have highlighted various problems which the agriculture education is suffering, mainly because we don't have opportunity for practical teaching as well as experiential learnings. These are very important. So how do we develop this thing and how we can cope with the situation? We need to give more focus on it, because you said that e-learning is going to be the major investment and we should be ready for it. All universities, including agriculture universities, should invest more on this e-learning things. So with this we now conclude our 10th webinar. And once again, I would like to say that West Innovation University could successfully conduct 10 webinars on this very important subject. And very, very eminent people have attended from 1st to 10th webinars, and all their suggestions and recommendations. We are going to have like a report. We produce a report and we'll share with everyone. And it will be very useful for learning as well as devising our technology for the future. So thank you for all the speakers for joining. I would like to also thank our chairman, Dr. Bharatlal Meena-ji, as well as Chancellor, Dr. Rupa Vasudevan-ji, the Vice Chancellor, Dr. D.L. Maheshwar-ji, and all other eminent participants from WFE, Ms. Elise Kamunge, and Dr. Ayla, and all the members of WWLC who are here attending this conference. I also thank our faculty members as well as the students who are joining for this webinar. And we conclude our 10th webinar on this important topic. As the Chancellor was saying, from next week onward, we will have webinars on some other important topic that will be agriculture related. So it is my privilege that I attended all the 10 webinars and interacted with so many eminent people. And it's really a great learning experience for all of us. Thank you very much for joining for this webinar. Thank you. All the best.